לכולם ותודה שהצטרפתם. אני לירון פרבר, CTO של חברת פרולוג'י, ואנחנו כאן היום בוובינר להצגת המוצר סיינר נאו לניהול פגיעויות ופאץ' מנג'מנט של חברת secpod. אז קודם כל, לפני שנתחיל, רק כמה מילים. אנחנו מצלמים את הוובינר ואנחנו נעלה אותו לרשתות. אני ממש מבקשת, אל תצלמו, אל תקליטו, אל תעלו שום דבר, אנחנו עושים את הכל בצורה מסודרת על ידי המרקטינג שלנו. ואם יש לכם שאלות תוך כדי הוובינר, אתם יותר ממוזמנים לשאול. תעשו את זה בבקשה דרך הסקשן של Q&A ולא דרך הצ'אט. וזהו. אז אנחנו כבר מתחילים. אני אשתף את המסך שלי מאוד שנייה. טוב, מעולה. אז כמה מילים על חברת פרולוג'י ככה, כדי שתכירו אותנו, מי שעדיין לא מכיר. אנחנו חברה שקיימת מעל 20 שנה בשוק, מונה מעל 800 עובדים, חברה פרטית. בראש החברה עומד ליאור לוי, המנכ"ל והמייסד של החברה. אנחנו עוסקים בשני תחומים עיקריים. תחום אחד זה כל נושא שירותי מיקור החוץ, עם יועצים שלנו שהם יוצאי יחידות טכנולוגיות לרוב, ונמצאים באמת בכל הסקטורים בתעשייה. והתחום השני הוא התחום שאליו אני שייכת, חטיבת המוצרים. בעצם אנחנו מפיצים של מגוון יצרניות אמריקאיות בארץ בבלעדיות, ביניהם SolarWinds, ונטי, היידרה, ויש עוד הרבה שמות שלא נמצאים פה. היום אנחנו כאן באמת כדי לדבר על secpod, שהם חברה שאנחנו מייצגים אותה כבר מעל שנתיים, ויש לה באמת פלטפורמה מדהימה לכל הנושא של ניהול פגיעויות וניהול ציודי קצה. באמת שאנחנו מדברים על העולם הזה, אז אנחנו מדברים על מוצר שהוא פורץ דרך בעינינו בתחום. באמת חיפשנו הרבה מאוד זמן מוצר שנוכל ככה להציג ללקוחות שלנו, שנותן פתרון מלא מקצה לקצה לכל העולמות האלה. אנחנו מדברים על פלטפורמה מודולרית עם הרבה מאוד יכולות, שתכף אנחנו באמת נצלול ונבין את כולם. קצת שתבינו מה הולך להיות בוובינר הזה, אז אני אעשה כרגע איזושהי פתיחה, ומיד אחריי יעלה נייג'ל, מטעם היצרן, שיבוא ויעשה לייב דמו למוצר. אז כמה מילים על secpod קודם. אז החברה קיימת 15 שנה בשוק, בשנת 2008 היא נוסדה. המטה של החברה היא חברה אמריקאית, המטה יושב בהודו. החברה באמת לאורך השנים הלכה ורכשה עוד חברות, ובאמת הפכה לאיזושהי פלטפורמה ככה כוללת, שנותנת מגוון יכולות במוצר אחד. בשנת 2018 גם יצאה גרסת הסאס של המוצר, אז באמת היום אנחנו נותנים פתרון גם לסביבות און-פרם, גם לסביבות ענן עם המוצר הזה. ככה אם תסתכלו על השקף, אתם יכולים באמת להתרשם רק מחלק מהלקוחות בעולם שסקפוד היום נותנת להם מענה ומשתמשים במוצר שלה. ואם אנחנו רוצים רגע שנייה להתמקד בכל הנושא של באמת ניהול פגיעויות, אז אנחנו יודעים שבעצם אנחנו מדברים על איזשהו סייקל שכל הזמן חוזר על עצמו. קודם כל אנחנו רוצים לזהות את הפגיעות, אוקיי? להעריך אותה, להבין כמה היא חמורה, לעשות איזשהו תעדוף לאותה פגיעות אל מול פגיעויות אחרות שאנחנו זיהינו, ולהחליט את מי אנחנו בעצם נטפל בה קודם. ובסוף אנחנו בעצם רוצים לתת איזושהי שקיפות ארגונית, ובעצם התהליך הזה הוא תהליך שחוזר חלילה. בעצם secpod בא לתת מענה לכל הנושא הזה של הגלגל הזה, על ידי מניעה של הוולנרביליטי מרגע הזיהוי שלה. אנחנו תכף נבין איך זה עובד. קצת על הפלטפורמה עצמה. אז באמת מדובר על פלטפורמה מודולרית. יש לנו כאן 7 מודולים שתכף אנחנו נרחיב עליהם. כמה מילים קודם לכן. אז אנחנו מדברים על מוצר שהוא מבוסס agent וסינגל קונסול, יודעת לתת מענה כמו שאמרתי גם לעולמות הקלאוד וגם לעולמות האון פרם. מבחינת ציודים שהיא יודעת לנהל, אז הפלטפורמה מנהלת תחנות קצה, שרתים, Network Devices ו-Virtual Devices, עם קטלוג של מעל 400 אפליקציות של third party, שאנחנו יודעים לעשות להם Patch Management באמצעות המוצר באופן אוטומטי, תומכת בכל מערכות ההפעלה, Windows, Linux ו-Mac. מבחינת המודולים של המוצר, אז כמה מילים. המוצר באמת מתמקד בשלושה סקטורים. בעולם של Visibility and Control יש לנו מודול שנקרא Asset Exposure, שבעצם נותן לנו סוג של inventory לכל האסטים שאנחנו מנהלים. המודול השני נקרא Anomaly Posture, שבעצם מה שהוא עושה, מאפשר לנו לזהות אנומליות בתוך האסטים שזיהינו, ובעצם לחפש את אותם ציודים שככל הנראה יש איתן איזושהי התנהגות חריגה, ובעצם לסווג אותם ולהתחיל לחקור ממה זה נובע, כמובן בהיבטי הסייבר. הסקטור השני מדבר על כל נושא של זיהוי ותיעדוף, Detection and Prioritization. Vulnerability Management הוא המודול הראשון, יודע לזהות פגיעויות, יודע לזהות את ה-Zero Days, אוקיי? ובעצם להציג לנו את כל הפגיעויות שזיהינו בצורה מסודרת בקונסול אחוד. Compliance Management יודע לבדוק תאימות של האסטים שלנו אל מול תקנים מסוימים, בין אם הם תקנים בינלאומיים או תקנים שאתם ייצרתם in-house אצלכם ואתם רוצים לבדוק תאימות אליהם. המודול החמישי, שהוא בעצם המודול האחרון שהצטרף לפלטפורמה הזאת, נקרא Risk Prioritization, שבעצם מאפשר לתעדף את הפגיעויות ולהגיד לנו למי מהם יש בעצם את הסיכון להיות נפיץ בסבירות הגבוהה ביותר. הסקטור השלישי כבר מדבר על טיפול ומיטיגיישן, כל הנושא של רמידיאשן. אז כאן יש לנו מודול בשם Patch Management, שבעצם יודע לפאץ' את הציודים שלכם ולתת תיקונים לפגיעויות שנמצאו, ו-Endpoint Management, שבעצם מאפשר לכם את כל הנושא של Device Management והקשחות וניהול של הציודים בכל מיני היבטים שאנחנו תכף נראה בדמו. אז זוהי הפלטפורמה ממש ממש על קצה המזלג, אנחנו תכף נצלול לכל אחד מהמודולים ונקבל קצת יותר אינפוטים ונבין בדיוק איך הכל עובד ביחד. כמה מילים ככה לסיום לפני שאני אעביר את השרביט לנייג'ל. אז באמת secpod הוא מוצר שיודע לתת מענה לכל מה שנותנים המוצרים האחרים שאנחנו מכירים שעובדים בשוק הזה, בין אם אלה Tenable, Qualys, Rapid7, גם בנושא של firmwares, אוקיי? בתוך secpod יש לכם מענה לכל זה במוצר אחד. קצת על מספרים, secpod מבצעת מעל ביליון סריקות ברמה השנתית, אוקיי? מעל 5 ביליון פגיעויות נחשפות באמצעות המוצר מדי שנה. יש להם אחוז דיוק של מעל 99.99%. זמן ממוצע להוצאת תיקון לפגיעות שזוהתה עד 30 שעות. אנחנו מדברים על כיסוי של 100% מה-Zero Days ועל יכולת תיקון של לפחות 86.4%. אז כמו שאתם רואים, הנתונים כאן הם מאוד מאוד מרשימים. אני אתן לכם להתרשם בעיניים. נייג'ל, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Leon. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm doing very well.
Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to forward the lead to you. So go ahead, let's do a demo.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Nigel here. I'm part of the secpod team, and I'll take you through a quick walkthrough of the product. I always say that a walkthrough and a demo of the product is worth more than 1,000 slides. So that's exactly what I'll try to do here. And in the meantime, if you do have any questions that you'd want help with, if anything comes up in your mind, just let me know in the chat. We'll be more than happy to take care of that and address any queries that you may have. So right off the bat, with this demo and the introduction that was given by Leon and the presentation in and of itself, transitioning from that into the platform here, what we see in front of us is the sort of dashboard for our tool. Now, we call it the unified dashboard, but for you, this could be the home page where you see an idea of how many devices you have running in your environment, what are the statistics of all this information, how many vulnerabilities, how many patches that you need to deploy, and all the relevant information. One thing I'd like to bring to your attention to, and one thing that I'd like to say right off the bat, is we support multi-tenancy. And what I mean by that is, if you would like to go ahead and manage each of your departments individually, let's say you have someone managing your HR department and one person managing your IT department individually and separately, you could do that here. You could come and create an HR account, you could come and create a marketing account, an engineering account if you'd want to. Or if you just had multiple sites, you could also do that for an enterprise customer, have multiple sites, manage each of those sites individually. So none of them overlap when it comes to any of your patching needs or vulnerability assessments. So with the purpose of this demo, what I'll do is I'll jump into my custom demo account, which is where I do most of my demos here and walkthroughs. And from the platform here, something that we should keep in mind of, besides, of course, the number of devices that we have, is a couple of numbers here. We have an idea from a high level perspective that for my account here and for the devices within my account, how good I am in terms of how many vulnerabilities I have, how many misconfigurations that exist, how many anomalies that I may find in my devices, and the total number of patches that I may need to go ahead. I'm just a small guy. I have about 30 devices tops, but for an enterprise customer and for customers that have hundreds of thousands and devices, the numbers could be quite daunting. You might not know where to go ahead and begin to target first in terms of your patching activities, because you have 10,000 different patches that you need to deploy. Where do you actually begin? What is the device that is the most critical for you to go ahead and fix first? One thing and one way where we can help you out here is something that is called the cyber hygiene score. And what I like to let you know about the cyber hygiene score is, on a scale of a 0 to 100, we sort of take into consideration the factors. So what are the different patches that your device is missing? How many vulnerabilities exist on those devices? What are the different misconfigurations? Do you have any anomalies? What are the prioritized risks? So 5 different changed according to what you'd like it to be changed to. And based off of this information, so the patches, the vulnerabilities, etc., we give you a score closer to well. I'm at a 43 right now, which is not that good for my organization, honestly. Hopefully, you guys are doing better. And the main idea behind giving you a score for your devices is to come here and look at, you may have an idea of where you'd want to begin with your patching activities by looking at a device that has a pretty low score. So a couple of devices here in my account, if I look, 16 server, which has a score of just 3, and a couple of CentOS devices, which have a fairly reasonable score of 81. So I know that if I need to go ahead with any patching activities that I need to conduct in my environment, I may want to go ahead and target the Windows 2016 device first, because it has a pretty low score in my environment. And the way that I want to target this device first is because it may lead to a cyber attack in the future, because it has a lot of vulnerabilities, it has a lot of risks, etc., etc. One thing to keep in mind with going ahead and patching your devices is looking at your devices from a vulnerability perspective may not always be the best case, may not always be the most optimal strategy here. And a lot of times what happens is, when we talk to customers and when we talk to the people out there and ask them why they go ahead with patching their devices, most of the times what happens is that the teams are just being told they have to go and patch them. The security of 10 vulnerabilities, these are critical, go ahead and patch them immediately. So that may not always be the best case, and let me tell you why. Coming to vulnerability management, which is a module as part of the whole platform in general, this dashboard, if I were to go ahead and look at my colleague's laptop here, my colleague Nagraj here, let's look at his laptop. He has a device with about 267 different vulnerabilities. And a couple of them have pretty critical vulnerabilities and 25 critical vulnerabilities. Some of them are. And I have a Fedora device here that has about 168 different vulnerabilities. Now, if your team was to go ahead and tell you that go ahead and patch my colleague's device first, patch Nagaraj's device first because it has the more number of vulnerabilities, and then go ahead and patch the Fedora device, the patching teams would be, okay, give me that information, I'll go ahead and patch them immediately. But looking at it from a broader perspective and why that may not be the best way to go about it is if I come back here to the cyber high device has a lower score as compared to my colleague's laptop. Even though my colleague's laptop has more vulnerabilities, more critical vulnerabilities, it still has a better score than my Fedora device. And the reason for this is we don't just take vulnerabilities into consideration here. Of course, it is the main factor, one of the top 5 factors, and you should definitely look at vulnerabilities. But basing your entire patching strategy off of vulnerabilities may not always be the best case. And by way of example, what we've done here for this Fedora device, we've gone ahead and disabled the antivirus on it. We've had a very small, there's no account lockout threshold enabled. So all of this taken into consideration, the account lockout threshold, there's no firewall enabled, the antivirus is out of date. That information is coupled with the vulnerabilities and giving you a lower score than just my vulnerability. So taking a step back, you don't have to look at just the vulnerabilities and what you need to go ahead and patch. You can look at what's the holistic picture, your components that not just comprise of vulnerabilities, everything in general, to go ahead and deploy patches on your devices. And all of this information sort of bubbles down to something that we like to call a risk prioritization. And how risk prioritization works is you have your environment. You have a couple of hundred devices, you have a couple of thousand devices in your environment, or whatever the number may be. Your environment and my environment are definitely not the same. You may have a couple of devices that are critical. I may have less number of devices that are critical. So a vulnerability for you and a vulnerability for me may not always be the same. That vulnerability for you could be even worse than what it is for me because you have a device that is maybe internet facing that has that vulnerability. And that's where this module comes into the picture, where we sort of gauge how your environment is set up. And when I say gauge how your environment is set up, we ask you a couple of questions. So what are the most critical devices in your account? You know, if you have any devices that are internet facing, are there any devices that are very critical in terms of some databases, some engineering devices on them? You let us know that information along with the important software applications. Like I said, maybe you have an SQL database. It has company policies involved on them. You might want to go ahead and make sure that that database is always patched, always up to date, so that it has the least number of vulnerabilities. So just like this, we ask you a couple of questions. You'll give us the answers for 10 to 15 different questions, I would assume. Based off of the answers that you give, built. So you tell us the top 10 devices, the top 10 most important assets. And after you give us the information, we'll recategorize the vulnerabilities and misconfigurations into the 4 different categories. They're called Act 10, Track, Star, and Track, but you could just think of it as your P1, P2, P3, and P4 tickets if you'd want to. This is for your Act level of risks in your environment, for 419 different risks, you need to fix them today. If possible, talk to your security teams, let them know that you have about 400 different vulnerabilities. You need to fix them today because these are important for your organization. They're on your internet-facing devices, they're on your mission-critical assets. Fix them as soon as possible. For 1,317 different vulnerabilities, maybe talk to your security team, let them know that they need to fix this very quickly. I would assume not as fast as you act, but let them know maybe this week is when they need to go ahead and fix this. Tell them that they have very important jobs that they have to do to take care of these 1,300 risks. And for your other 2 categories that are there, your P3 and P4 tickets, maybe your standard patching cycle of 15 days would work for your Trackstar, and then your 30-day patching cycle would work for your track level of vulnerabilities. So you don't have to look at it from a very, panic patching is what we call it here back at secpod, where you go ahead and you see that okay, this is about 17,000 different risks. Where do I have to start? I'm going to patch all critical first. And then you kind of get confused of what goes where. So with secpod, you can sort of step back and look at things from a more calmer perspective that fits you and fits your organization best. And then you can take action in a more streamlined approach so that you can effectively take care of the vulnerabilities that you have in your environment and then go ahead and deploy the patches, of course. If you want to know some information about why a vulnerability has fallen into a certain category of P1 tickets or P2 tickets, we show you a decision tree for that information. So for this particular vulnerability, if I were to go ahead and look at the information, it has low exploitability rather. It's not automatable. It has a partial technical impact. And even though it's on a mission critical device, the path it tells me is that it deserves to be in the track category. So I can go ahead and manage this particular vulnerability and a 30-day patching cycle. So that's really how we differ from a broad perspective, from a high-level overview. I still see a lot of organizations out there going ahead and doing panic patching where they don't really know where to begin. They kind of go ahead and just take care of the critical vulnerabilities first, but that may not be the best way because, like I said, going after the vulnerabilities when it comes to this may not be the best case. If I were to look at an example here under my misconfigurations, I see that a couple of devices have the account lockout threshold disabled. And all I have to do to get into that device is brute force an entry into that device. I have numerous methods of doing concurrent in today's current day. And that's the best way, that's the most easiest way I can get into your account. So I need to go ahead and fix that device first because it has no lockout threshold. How do I figure out this information, you may ask me? How do I know what the different vulnerabilities are? How do I know what I need to patch, what I need to fix, what the different applications and devices in my environment are? Well, there are a couple of ways we can actually find that information out to you. We come as a solution that is both cloud and on-prem, both agent-based approach and an agentless approach as well. And for the major operating systems that you have out there, your Windows, your Linux, your Mac, AIX even that we've currently recently introduced, it's pretty simple. All you need to do is download the agent, have it pushed onto that device, and the console is up and running in a matter of minutes. You can manage your entire infrastructure in 10 minutes tops. You can run scans, you can do patching, everything from the console in less than 10 minutes. And it's pretty simple to integrate with any Active Directory you may have. You can also create a GPO, a policy to go ahead and deploy these agents onto your endpoints. If you have an Active Directory, no problem, you can just sync up with that information. Now, coming back to the platform, and one thing, now that we've covered up the most important aspect of how this platform can help you in terms of differentiators from some of the competitors. The platform is sort of divided up into 4 different categories, 4 different hallmarks of this entire life cycle is what we like to call it. So we have visibility and normalize, which is basically where we find out what your hardware, your software, your licenses, all that information. We then go ahead with vulnerability management, where we can find out what is wrong with them, what the different applications are that need patching. Risk prioritization, I just spoke about. We can go ahead and prioritize what's important for you. And finally, you have patch management, where you can go ahead and patch everything that you want to go ahead and patch and take care of your device with endpoint management. I'll begin step by step. It's a step-by-step process here with asset exposure. And what asset exposure is, well, you could call it your asset inventory tool, your asset management tool, where we get information about your hard, about your devices that are your virtual machines, your IRL devices, anything that you'd want to have in your environment is what we can capture that. Hardware, software doesn't really matter. Any application that is running in your environment, we'll find that information out. We can show you where that application actually is. Also the licenses. If you have any license applications like MS365 and you want to figure out what devices are running MS365 without a license, we'll show you that list of information as well. And of course, outdated applications, if you have any applications that are no longer supported by the vendor. I know Internet Explorer went out of commission in about 2018. That's why it's an outdated application for me. Blacklisted application, if you have any applications that you don't want any user in your environment to be running, you can go ahead and blacklist certain applications. And finally, rarely used applications, where if an application is not being used for a couple of years or a couple of months, you can maybe go ahead and block that application or delete that application, whatever you want to do, so that it doesn't turn up to you later on as a vulnerability that you need to go ahead and patch. So minimize your attack surface is basically what we're letting you know over here. Is posture anomaly. And how posture anomaly is supposed to be looked at, it's a pretty interesting module if you ask me. We figured out what your hardwares are. We figured out what the softwares are, all the operating system applications, all the information in your. So the next thing to do here is, of this information that we get, what is something in your environment? So let me give you an example here. If you have about 100 devices in your environment, and 99 of those devices are running Google Chrome, and one of the devices are running Mozilla Firefox, why is one device running Firefox and 99 of them running Chrome? That is something that is not normal. You might think to yourself, maybe that guy is doing something he shouldn't be doing. Now, a browser example, when it comes to security threats, I would assume. But something that could be more important is if a couple of devices in your environment have their firewall disabled. That's something that you should really keep an eye out on, figure out what devices have their firewall disabled, and then go ahead and maybe activate your firewall, change some policies on your firewall, whatever you want to do. Another thing is if your devices have any gaming applications installed on them, maybe one of your employees kids have installed Roblox on your environment, you can go ahead and find out what devices have the gaming application. Come here, see a list of devices that have any gaming applications installed on them, and then you can do whatever you want to do. Maybe you want to go ahead and block the particular application if you want to. Fix this by blocking it, deploying some softwares to go ahead and remediate that. Your choice, anything that you want to do. Out of the box, we have about 75 different checks here that you see here, these different cubes. But assuming you don't like any of the checks, like your VPN or gaming installations, you can actually build your own checks here. You can come here to the detection and response category and actually make your own query. So for example, if I wanted to know what devices in my environment are running a particular antivirus like Kaspersky, I can send out an informatory probe into my environment and find out that 10 devices are running Kaspersky and 10 devices are not running Kaspersky. And then maybe what I'd want to do is go ahead and push Kaspersky onto those 10. Maybe uninstall it from the 10 devices that already have it. Choices up to you. And one thing that is interesting about posture anomaly is the ability to create a baseline in your environment. And now, when I say a baseline, this could be something like a golden image that you have. Now, if you have a golden image that says, I only want the browser to be Google Chrome, I only want port 80 and port 443 to be open in my environment, I only want so-and-so process to be running, so-and-so service to be running, that's a golden image that you can create here. You whitelist what is okay for your environment. So port 80 is okay for my environment. A couple of services would be okay, a couple of processes would be okay as well. And any devices that are running, for example, any devices that are running anything other than port 80, if they're running port 443, that's something that will be shown to you. That's a flag off for you saying, hey, I've created a golden image, but this device is actually having port 443 open. He doesn't have Chrome, his antivirus is disabled. Go ahead and fix this device. So you can create a golden image, you can create a baseline here, and anything that is not a part of this adherence would then be flagged to you as an anomaly for you to take care of. So now that we found out this posture anomaly, the next module here is vulnerability management. And I've spoken a bit, but it's like your traditional VM tool, you could say, where we give you an idea of how many vulnerabilities exist in your environment, the different severities of the vulnerabilities, your low, medium, high, and critical level of vulnerabilities. What are the most common attacks that are out there here that could affect your devices? So if I were to take, for example, any ransomware, this ransomware actually makes use of this vulnerability here to get into any device. And that vulnerability is actually on these two devices here. So I know that if a ransomware were to enter my organization, and this ransomware in particular, these two devices would be the most likely source of that ransomware because it has a vulnerability on this application that ransomware makes use of to get into my device. So I might want to go ahead and patch these devices immediately so I don't have any critical cyber attacks that can happen on those devices in the future. And all this information, we can give you a commitment that maybe 3 minutes for your Linux and Mac devices is when we'll pull all this information out. So scans will run about 3 minutes for your for your Linux and Mac. And maybe about 5 to 10 minutes for your Windows devices is when we can guarantee you either an agentless scan or an agent-based scan. Both of them are possible. Now that we found out this information about vulnerabilities, that's your CVEs, there's also compliance management. And compliance management has everything to do with your benchmarks. And when I say benchmarks, you could think of it as your PCI, your HIPAA, your NIST. We have a couple of benchmark templates that are out of the box that you can make use of directly. So if you wanted to go ahead and say, for example, you wanted to go ahead and deploy the PCI compliance, you could actually go ahead, let's take my RHEL device here. Show me a report for what devices are being actually compliant to the PCI benchmark that is there. If I wanted to come here and edit a particular benchmark to best suit my organization, for example, if PCI said that you should have 120 characters, I can come here and actually edit anything that I want so that it best fits my organization, and this benchmark would best fit my organization. And once you go ahead and deploy this benchmark in your environment, you would find a list here of how many devices are actually being compliant to the benchmark that you've deployed and how many devices are not being compliant to the benchmark that you've deployed. So by clicking on the drop-down menu here, I see one device has passed this particular check of the suit installed, and a couple of them have failed here as well. So 52% of the rules are compliant, and 48% of the rules are not compliant for the devices in my environment. And we don't just tell you, okay, you have 50% compliance to the PCI benchmark. We'll also give you a fix for them as well. So we'll say you can come here to the fix misconfigurations and actually deploy patches to go ahead and make that PCI benchmark as 100% compliance in your environment. And then this can be automated as well. You can have this rule run on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or on a monthly basis. So you can have 100% compliance for your PCI benchmark or any benchmark in general in your environment. 100% compliance on a regular basis, and not just when the auditor comes to your company and asks you to go ahead and show me the compliance report. And if you have any problems with the benchmarks that you've deployed, let's assume they caused you a problem, you can roll the patches back. That's not an issue. And finally, the auto this entire process done with zero touch every day, every week, or every month. You can go ahead and see 100% compliance on your devices. So yeah, coming back to risk prioritization, I already spoke about this, but yeah, quickly to just refresh the prioritize risk for your vulnerability, different benchmarks that you've created, and the different vulnerabilities that we find, so for you to go ahead and patch them according to what is best for your organization. Is the top need to do in my active category, that is, what is the top in my organization? What do I module after risk prioritization, and actually go ahead and deploy patches as well. So a couple of numbers here on your screen. If I was to go ahead and explain what they were, 20 devices in my environment require about 704 patches. And these 704 patches would take care of about 12,000 different vulnerabilities. And the deploying of patches are pretty simple. All you need to do is select on a particular patch that you need to go ahead and deploy, create a patching task for you, and then that's it. Basically, you give it a task name, some controls over your patching activities, whether you want to reboot it, some notifications. Test and deploy is a function that the customers really like, where they go ahead and test patches out in their test environment, and then they can automatically push it out into the production. production, that's up to them. And yeah, that's basically it. You can create a patching task and have that patching. Now, there are two types of patches that are supported here. We cover both operating system and third-party patches as well. But we cover security and non-security patches. And what the difference between security and non-security patches are is the security patches would take any vulnerabilities that exist. So if there's a Chrome vulnerability that is Chrome has an application update that goes from 10.1 to 10.2, for example, that's not a vulnerability. That's more like an application update. So that's a non-security patch for you. And you have two separate tabs for that, of course, and you can patch how you want to, either the application updates first and then your vulnerable patches, or maybe your vulnerable patches first and then your application updates, whatever you want to. And yeah, we support most of the operating systems out there with Windows, Unix, and Mac, and over 550 different third-party applications. When I spoke about the high fidelity attacks and the cyber attacks that can happen in your organization, most critical patches would actually take care of the vulnerabilities that those cyber attacks makes use of. If I come here to most critical patches and I deploy all these patches, they would make sure that some of these attacks that you see here under the high fidelity attacks would not enter, rather I wouldn't say would not enter, would have a tough time of entering your environment. And you have firmware upgrades as part of the console where you can upgrade your device type, OS level you can roll patches back as well with the rollback option. You can have automation rules set for zero touch patching, where let's say you want to go ahead and patch all your Windows after patch Tuesday. You can create a rule that says for any device that has Microsoft level patches in my HR department on a patch Tuesday, go ahead and patch them automatically. And this ensures that you have zero touch patching. You don't have to come here and do it manually, which of course you can do. But if you want to go ahead and patch this automatically, you can just do it that. And you have the status column here to show you the information of how well you're doing in terms of your patching activities. As I see here, a couple of them have been successful. The reason for success as well. If any device is not being patched, I see a failure reason as well. So you have an idea of what's going on in your environment. Lastly, the last module here with endpoint management is once you've done your patching activities, you can come management and take actions against your device. A feature that customers really like is software deployment. And with software deployment, you can go ahead and push softwares out into your environment, either custom software that you can upload or a list of software that we have within our catalog. Or if you want to go ahead and uninstall any application, you can also uninstall them as well. If you want to go ahead and take a remote control of your device, you can go ahead and enable remote access, where you can go ahead and remote to a device either via the GUI or via the shell, whatever you want to, that's up to you. And honestly, there are quite a few talking points with endpoint management, and I won't go through all the bells and whistles of what we have. But in short, what we can do is you can go ahead and block applications, unblock applications, disable your USB, disable any mouse, clean up your endpoint and your services that are running there, clean your registries for your Windows devices, shut down a system, reboot a system, rename a system, whatever you want to do. Take care of your device level firewall. So if you have Defender, you want to take care of Defender, you can come here, security, and take care of Defender, quarantine a file, delete a file, and basically just take care of your startup programs that you have. And small points to find out the last logged on users, any inactive users, or what is the current RAM or CPU utilization, and how healthy your system is doing in the current stage. So what is the disk size, how much CPU is used up, all that management module. And all of this will tie back into a reporting module that you can use as well, where you can have saved reports out of the console. Some of these reports are built by us. Of course, these are reports that we think that could be helpful for you, whether it's a patch report or whether it's a vulnerability report. These are the reports that are currently out of the box for you to use. But of course, you may find some of these reports may not suit you to the maximum. And what you can do is you can also create your own report. If you have a specific template that you want to build, you can also build your own report here. It's pretty drag and drop whatever you want to, and get information that best suits you, that you actually want to see for your environment and for your devices. And for your ITSM tools that you have in the environment, we can work with your Freshworks, with your ServiceNow. To have that information pulled, you can create a change request, a ticket, and alerts are generated, map it to a CI, and then have necessary information in your environment. So that's a good high-level overview of the platform. I too deep into the technicalities and the technical aspects. But from a high-level perspective, you can have a lot to offer here on the platform. And I would assume there's a couple of questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them. But yeah, that's it from me and from the platform demonstration. If any questions here, I'm happy to take care of them.
Thank you very much, Nigel, for the demo. It was great as always. I will switch to Hebrew now. אז קודם כל תודה לכולם שהשתתפתם, אנחנו אנחנו פה לעוד כמה דקות לכל מי שיש שאלות. בזמן הזה אני אנצל את הבמה על מנת להזמין אתכם לוובינר הבא שלנו שיתקיים ב-12 לאוגוסט. אנחנו נציג בו, לא רואים? רגע, רק שנייה אחת, רק שנייה, אנחנו... אתם צריכים לראות? בואו נשתף שוב, שנייה אחת. רואים? לא. טוב, לא ברור מה קרה פה. כן, Nigel, can you please stop the screen sharing?
Yep.
אוקיי, good. טוב, אז עכשיו שרואים, אז אני אשמח להזמין את כולכם לוובינר הבא שלנו שיתקיים ב-12 לאוגוסט. אנחנו נדבר על פלטפורמת הניטור של SolarWinds, Hybrid Cloud Observability. אתם יותר ממוזמנים להצטרף. אנחנו בינתיים משאירים את הוובינר פתוח. אני משאירה בשקף הבא את הפרטים שלי. אתם יותר מוזמנים לשאול שאלות או לקבוע איתנו דמו ספציפי עבורכם. תודה שהשתתפתם, ממש נשמח לראות אתכם שוב ולהתראות בינתיים. Nigel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
We're going to leave the webinar open for a few more minutes if someone have questions or want to ask something, or maybe to set a demo specific for him. So we'll give them the opportunity to ask. So we'll be here for another 5 minutes, and thank you everyone for joining us.